Hebrews chapter 4. We are in a series called Supreme. It's the theme of the book of Hebrews. If you're not familiar with the Bible, Hebrews is in the back. It's a letter that was circulated in the first century to the churches of the first century. And it was written primarily to a group of Jewish Christians who were thinking about stepping out on their faith in Jesus Christ. They were struggling, as many Christians in that era were. It's hard to be a Christian in the world that we live in. Especially if, things keep going the way they are. It's just going to be increasingly difficult, but you can rest assured that it was tougher in first century existence to follow Jesus, especially as a former Jew in the Roman Empire. The Romans didn't like Christians. The Jews certainly didn't like Christians. And so if you were a former Jewish person, or Jewish worshiper who had joined Christ, you got it coming and going. The Romans and your family were both, pushing in on you, ostracizing you and persecuting you. So it's understandable that these Christians that were being written were struggling with their faith, and the writer just sends them a central message. It just keeps hammering the same nail. Jesus is supreme. Don't let him go. Jesus is supreme, period. You just don't want to be in life without him, and that's the message of these 13 chapters that make up Hebrews. Stick with Jesus. He's worth it. The way the writer of Hebrews does it is the way most of the Bible is written. He spends equal parts, not equal, but mostly equal parts promoting Jesus and extolling his values, while at the same time warning about life without him. Like, here's why you need him. He's awesome. But here's why you need him. If you don't have him, it's bad, right? Promotions and warnings. At different times, even in these first three chapters, he's talked about how Jesus is superior to angels. He's superior to the Jewish hero Moses, the prophet and leader of the forefathers of these Jewish Christians. He's even better or superior to the high priest of Israel, which if you were Jewish, you're like, what? He's like our pope. He's like the highest. But Jesus is the great high priest. His point is that Jesus rules. Why would you settle for anything less? It's like a no-brainer. Why would you miss out on what he alone can offer you? I used to go to NBA games in Dallas. The Mavericks play there, and got to go a few times on some youth trips, youth group trips and stuff like that. But we always bought the cheap seats. Has anybody been to a cheap seat in a stadium anywhere? You're in the stadium, barely, right? But you kind of. I brought binoculars so I could read the names on the back of the jerseys and stuff like that, and so. They had a promotion during those years before I got here to Florida, where if you were in the nosebleeds, if they drew your tickets, if they drew your seats, the seats around you, you could actually move from the back row to the front row. They had lazy boy recliners, free food from all the very best concessions. It was like this major prize. And so before a first time out or during the first time out, they would say, all right, we're announcing whatever the name of the promotion was. And one year I was there with a bunch of kids from the youth group, and just 3 or 4 seats down in the next section, just across the aisle, these people in the very back row of the stadium there in Dallas won the free seats, right? And we were all cheering. We were kind of jealous, but we were all cheering, right? Excited for their blessing. And all the times that I went there, I never saw one person in the cheap seats say to the people, running the promotion, hey, no thanks. We bought these seats because we really wanted them. Like, this is where we want to sit. It's hard to see. There's a big column in front of us. A huge male, blocks most of the court. But we're good. We don't want the lazy boys on the front row. If they had said that and we were close enough to them, there would have been a riot. People would have been punching. Take me, right? Because I'm probably overplaying this. But a good thing when you see it, right? It'd be dumb to not level up and receive, a blessing when it's put before you. And so this is what I talk to people about all the time with Jesus. I know listen, you might be here this morning, you got all these reasons why you don't believe in him or why you think this is just all made up and stuff like that. But if there is a God, there is. And if his son is Jesus, he is. And he is supreme, why would you miss out on him? He's the front row, baby. Get out of the nosebleeds. He spends a lot of time promoting, but he also spends time warning, and that's where we find ourselves today. There's been several warnings here in the book of Hebrews already, to be careful not to lose sight of Jesus lest you drift away. That's how chapter 2 starts. It goes on, and in chapter 2, it gets really specific in the warning that the writer gives to these readers. He says, hey, if every transgression or disobedience receives a just retribution, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? It's like his question to his readership. What are we doing? If sin, if you don't understand what I just read, here's basically what the writer's saying. Sin comes with a price. There is a just God. He's holy and righteous, gracious and loving, absolutely, but holy and righteous at the same time. And so in his grace and in his love for us, he's provided Jesus, so that if we put our trust in him, we receive from him the forgiveness that we can't achieve for ourselves, and we are redeemed, atoned, however you want to say it, and we are reconnected to life with God. It's a great deal, grace and love. But if we neglect that salvation, if we say no to what God has offered us, we will stand before him, our righteous judge, and he will rightly judge us for our sin. And so the writer's like, hey, yeah, Jesus is awesome. He's the lazy boy in the front row. He's the best. Why would you miss him? But if you do miss him, don't get it twisted. It's not going to end well for you, because he's a righteous judge who's provided a loving and gracious route out of judgment through Jesus. But if you reject Jesus, you reject that grace. And retribution's coming. We're in another part of a warning here in the letter that the writer writes to the Hebrews. And it's going to culminate today with what I want to talk to you about. The subject throughout the next few verses is the rest that we can have with God. God's rest. Who in here needs a rest? Some of you are already leaning. I'm just starting, and I can already tell I'm going to lose some of you. That's why we have the padded chairs. I know it was real practical back in the day, but it was really hard to sleep on the wood pews. Anybody growing up, in the church on the wood pews? I think that was probably strategic by some of the preachers back then. Make them uncomfortable, right? But here we got these nice soft black chairs. Mike, if you want, you just kind of slide down in that seat, put the head on the back. It's almost like you're at work. Anyway, I'm kidding. I love Mike. Anyway, if you need a rest, you're not alone. Who in here, just show a hand, who needs a rest right now? Anybody need a rest? Yeah, I was gone last week. Thanks, Josh Medlin, for preaching in my stead. He did a great job. But I went away on a vacation. A couple times a year, I get to go off in the woods and play golf with a bunch of friends, and it's great. But I came back late Thursday night, to spend some more time with Eleanor and get ready to preach to you this morning. And I woke up Friday morning after having like 5 days off. And I was like, great, I've had a vacation. I'm rested up. Has anybody gotten back from vacation and you need a vacation from your vacation? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It's like, what did I do? I'm so wasted right now. I just lolled around my house all day Friday, and I needed a rest from my rest, which is weird. But that's just kind of how we run, especially in our culture and the day that we live in. It is constant. The rate that we go at, I bet you 100 years ago, if we had a time machine, people came forward, they'd be like, what are you guys doing? This is crazy. They'd probably like indoor plumbing and all that stuff. But other than that, they'd be like, what is going on? You're constantly looking at your feeds. You're getting stressed out about everything in life. It's hectic. It's restless, this world that we live in. There's always something in it. I went out Friday night, Eleanor and I hadn't seen each other for a week, and so we went and grabbed some fajitas together, split them. That's how you do it these days. Anyway, but we're sitting there and the phone rings, and the phone rings, it's my son Ben. Ben drives a really old beat-up Lincoln, and on this particular drive back from his job in Tampa to where he lives in Plant City, the front axle decided to lock up on him, and so thankfully he didn't like steering traffic. He just kind of pulled off into the median, but he was in the median. I could hear the cars. Anybody had this phone call? You can just hear the cars going by. And he is very colorfully explaining his predicament. Ben's not with Jesus right now. It was loud. Anyway, he's just, I can't believe it. It's happening again. This is my life, blah, 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 blah. And, I was like, well, here's what you do. And he's in his 30s now. It's like, bro, calm down. Figure out your life. Call the tow truck. Well, but just wasn't on his schedule. Who's had something happen this week that wasn't on your schedule? Anybody had something like that? I mean, and again, first world problems. He's got a car. Lots of people don't. I get it. But it's just that kind of stuff happens all the time. Things break in a broken world. And it's hard to find rest in the midst of all the wreckage. Those are minor things. Cars breaking down, being tired from vacation. Everybody say boo-hoo, right? But some of us are in here and we're facing major stuff. Like I pray in the corner after we're done our services. And I'll share with you some of the yeah gods. Anybody hear some yeah gods? I talked with a lady last week. She was baptized just about a month ago here at our church. She'd been, diagnosed with what was probably cancer, but she was going back in for another scan and went back in. And by the grace of God, the cancer's not there. Yay, God, right? Pretty great. Still has to have surgery. Still has to have some things taken care of, and we pray about those things. But those are bigger things. When you got to open up your body and subject yourself to medicines that, should work but may not work, that's a little more stressful. Some of you are financially experiencing a pinch that you've not ever had to face before. Some of you are in families where you're praying for your marriage, you're praying for your kids, you're praying for your kids' marriage. There's all kinds of stuff that is bigger, harder as you experience life. It's tough. That's why I'm here to give you this one central message today as we talk about Jesus and his supremacy. Because Jesus is supreme, because he can be a part of our lives, God, through our trust in Jesus, can give us rest. God gives his rest to those who trust in him. That's my whole message this morning. God gives rest to those who trust in him. It's true. Initially, if we're talking about salvation, which is some of you, that's where you're at right now. You don't believe in God, you don't believe in Jesus, and you're tired. Life is kind of wearing you out. Listen, Jesus came so that you might have life through him, life abundantly with him. And he can lead you out of whatever's, wrecking you in life into what will give you rest. It's initial at salvation. It's perpetual in situations. Isn't that great? He doesn't just save us once, he saves us daily. He comes into our situations and he's like, hey, I can help. Let me. Trust me. Walk with me through this. That's where I find myself now. It's been 35 years now or so that I've had like a strong faith in Jesus. Grew up in the church like many of you maybe have, but it wasn't until I was almost out of college that I really came online with Jesus, okay? And so for those 35 years, ups and downs, good things, bad things. Anybody had a run? Yeah. But here's one thing that by God's grace has been a constant in all those things. I've, with varying degrees of success, trusted in him for all that I've lacked. And that's made all the difference in the stuff of my life. I trust it's been the same for many of you, that as we trust, he provides. And as he provides, he gives us rest. Now, when we were young, we didn't want to pay for babysitters. Anybody there right now? And so we'd go to gatherings, if it was okay with whoever we were going to visit, like a bunch of friends would get together. Hey, is it okay if we bring the kids? We were some of the first to have kids in our friend group, right? They all waited like we wanted to, until much later in their marriage. But I slipped one past the goalie. And that wasn't in last service. I want to retract that. Sorry. We got pregnant sooner than we thought we would, and so we had kids really young. And, sorry. So we had these little babies, and all of our friends didn't, and they thought it was really cute to bring our kids over to these parties, and they'd hang out. But we were young. We were in our mid-20s. We got these kids, and the party would, still be going on. Our kids needed to get some sleep, right? And I don't know if this was bad parenting, but we just let them sleep where we were, and it was an amazing thing. Anybody remember, those of you who are parents, like your 3-year-old in the midst of a loud, clamorous environment, just being able to shut everything out and just kind of lay their head on your shoulder as you cradled them in your, it's kind of like this picture right here. You see this? That's not me, but it's kind of this picture. Big party, lots of to-do, but the kid is at peace and at rest. Why? Because he's crawled up in dad's arms and he's safe there. He trusts that his father has got him. And so the rest of the world can go on, but I'm good. And that's the goal of the Christ life. Once we have faith in Jesus and we've been secured in our relationship with our Heavenly Father, he just wants us to crawl up in his lap and be like, rest. Rest, buddy. We'll get through this. I know life's crazy. I know you're tired, but let's rest. Trust in me, and I'll see you through. So let's go to our passage, and we'll see how all this is borne out as we read about God's rest. The warning comes immediately in the first verse, and it's going to be in different words, but it's basically this. Be afraid of not finding God's rest. Be afraid of not finding God's rest. The first verse of chapter 4 starts with therefore. If you're reading your Bibles and you kind of start at a verse that starts with therefore, you need to go back. It's referring to something that's happened already. The therefore is there for a reason, and so you got to go back and find out what that is. And if we went back to what Josh was preaching last week, we'd see that the therefore refers to a specific time in Jewish history at a place called Kadesh Barnea. Everybody say Kadesh Barnea. It's fun. There's some fun Bible words. That's one of them. At Kadesh Barnea in Numbers 14, the children of Israel who have been, in the book of Exodus, emancipated from slavery in Egypt by Moses and God obviously doing all the work. They've gotten outside of Egypt, and now they're kind of wandering in the wilderness, heading towards Canaan, which is what we know today as Israel, and that's the promised land. And they send some spies into the promised land. 12 of them, actually. For 40 days, they spy out the land, and then they come back with their report. And 10 of them have a very dismal picture of this land that God has promised us. Yeah, there's milk and honey. It's awesome over there, but there's all kinds of ites. I call them the ites. It's all the people whose last name ends in ites, like Amalekites and Canaanites and all the ites. And then there's some, the Nephilim, who are like giants, like Goliath was one of the Nephilim, like a giant. And so it's scary over there. There's no way we can't go across. We're just this, tribe of ragamuffin, wanderers. There's no way we can beat them. That's what the 10 said. 2 of them, Caleb and Joshua, okay, if your name's Caleb or Joshua, that's them. They're the originators. Caleb and Joshua come back and they're like, we're good. Yeah, we saw the same stuff, but we know the God that we know, and if he wants us to go in, we're going in. And spoiler alert, the Israelites side with the 10 and reject the message of the 2. That's what he's talking about. It's going to have a huge run in this passage. So everybody got that so far? So that's what the therefore is about. It moves from the therefore of the past to the present, while the promise of entering his rest still stands. This is great news. Okay, so Jewish people thought that the rest or the promise that God had given was tied to the land and was all back when their forefathers were trying to get in there. But what the writer of Hebrews is telling these Jewish Christians is like, no, God's rest isn't just in the land. God's rest is this thing that we can experience in life. And so because this promise of entering his rest still stands, here's the warning. Let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. It's an interesting Greek phrase there that's translated, seem to have failed to reach it. The writer of the Hebrews is writing this group of people who amongst them are those who have kind of played the game or been in process with the other Christians in their midst. They knew the language, had the accent down perhaps, but was their faith truly anchored in Jesus? Apparently not. They just seemed to be with him even though that they weren't. And the message of the writer is this: hey, if that's you, be very afraid. Because Jesus is this all or nothing thing, this all or nothing faith, this all or nothing relationship. He doesn't just want your kind of tacit attention. He wants your heart. He wants to be your personal Lord and Savior. And we should be fearful on missing out on what he died to give us in life. This is every church ever, not just these early Christians, early Jewish Christians that were being written by this writer. In fact, some of you might be here today because you're doing your family member a solid. It's good to be here. I'm here because he or she asked me to come. But I don't really care about all this. In fact, hurry up. It's, almost lunchtime and we got to get out of here. Okay, if that's you, I'm talking to you. Are you here? Are you hearing me? I'm talking to you. I believe you came on this day because God wanted you to hear this message. It's for you. so that you can know that kind of just being, loosely related to Jesus, by some family relationship, but by kind of, hanging around, orbiting him rather than landing on him. If you think that's enough, the writer of Hebrews is telling you, no, be very afraid of that stance in life. Be very afraid of just, going because your family requires it. Going with the flow is what's been your culture. I've talked to people who've gone to church their whole lives and at the age of 40 realize they're not Christians because they've just done what they've known to do. But as far as having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, it just never occurred to them that that's something I personally need to choose. I told you I was in college before I came online with Jesus. I was a pastor's kid. Not that makes me special. In fact, it probably doesn't. But of anybody who would, be a passionate follower of Jesus, you think the guy who grew up in the house where the guy got paid to be a Christian, that'd be him. But it wasn't the case. I was in a junior in college, at a Christian college, before I ever really gave my heart to Jesus. It happens all the time. And so if that's you, I'm talking to you. The whole cultural Christian thing needs to be done. And it needs to move forward in your life to where you have a true faith in Jesus Christ. It's all your own. Not your family's, not your parents, yours. Now, Eleanor and I, get to travel sometimes. This is 8 or 9 years ago. We went to Toronto. Anybody been to Toronto? Very lovely city there in Canada. We went because we wanted to see it, but secretly, I also knew the Boston Red Sox would be in town that week. Now, I have this bucket list, thing that I hope to accomplish. I want to see the Boston Red Sox play in every major league stadium. There's like 32 of them. I think I've got 6. Time is running out. Are you? But I was there in Toronto, and I was like, okay, they're in town. I'm going. And Eleanor was with me, so I was like, hey, babe, you want to go to the baseball game? The answer to that normally is no. Why? Eleanor doesn't like baseball. Baseball to Eleanor is like thrifting to me, okay? I don't want to go. Now, we will both go to each other's thing. Why? Because we love the other, not the thing. And so this is us. We're sitting out or standing. I don't know if the picture's there. If it already showed. Yeah, that's us. That's us at the Toronto, stadium. Yeah, we stayed all 9 innings. I give that credit to my wife. She was so loving that night. Just couldn't care less. Barely watched. Anybody got that friend who goes to a game with you or something like that? She's just like, is it over? Is that it? No? Okay, one more. All right. One more inning. Okay. But we went, and okay, look at me. Are you looking at me? If that's you, if you're at the game, but you're not a fan, I want you to know that the one you're not a fan of loves you. He's crazy about you. He made you. And his desire is to be in life with you. And that's why I believe you're here today. So you can hear the message that the writer of the Hebrews wrote to his friends. To say, hey man, be very afraid not to settle for missing out on the rest that God gives. Verse 2 says, for the good news came to us just as of them. Again, the writer of Hebrews kind of in the current period of history, comparing himself and his readers to those who came before them. In the Old Testament, he says, listen, the good news came to us just as it came to them. The Israelites in the desert got some good news. God's going to lead you into the promised land. But the message that they heard did nothing to benefit them. Why? Because they were not united by faith with those who listened. Let me kind of add some words to that might help. They were not united by faith with those who listened to God and trusted what he told them. If you're listening to me right now, I want you to know, I've read God's word. I've prayed and asked him to tell me what to tell you. I have sought to listen to God. I'm giving you his message, I pray, and not my own. And I am telling you what he says. And you have the choice when I get up here and preach, or Josh or Tom or anybody else gets up here and preaches. When you read the Bible yourselves, when you go to life group and someone talks to you about Jesus, you have the choice to listen to that messenger and what he or she says and accept it and act on it or not. And in the story of the Israelites in the wilderness, they had great messengers, Caleb and Joshua both, convinced of what God was telling them, even though 10 were against them. They said, we can go, we should go, we must go. But when it came to a vote, the people of Israel said, we're with the 10 and not with the 2. And just so you know, we're not going to read the whole passage in Numbers 14, but in Numbers 14, Joshua and Caleb storm the stage. Don't do that here. But Joshua and Caleb are like, we're not settling for this. They run up, they grab the mic from whoever the MC was, and this is what they say in verse 8 of chapter 14. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. I don't know if this is where piece of cake comes from, but it would totally make sense. Have you ever said that when something's easy? Piece of cake. You know what you're really saying? This is like eating cake. This is easy. Anybody eat cake and it's easy for you? Obviously, it's been very easy for me. I like to eat cake, right? But that's what they're saying. The enemies that we'll face, they're just lunch. They're bread for us, piece of cake. He says, this is why. Their protection is removed from them. Conversely, the Lord is with us. So don't fear those guys. And I picture a lot of, Hebrew let's goes, however you say that in Hebrew, right? Joshua and Caleb are like, come on, let's go, right? And so having heard this impassioned second plea, the nation of Israel relents and says, you're right, we should have listened to you all along. The 10 are wrong, the 2 are right, let's go. Is that what happens? No? You want to read the next verse? All the congregation said, let's stone these guys with stones. That's in your book. They don't. I didn't put the rest of the verse up there. The glory of God shines in that meeting in such a way that I think Caleb and Joshua are able to get out of there. But are the people so convinced in their version of the facts that they want to kill the 2 who would come against them? Yeah. And this is what's going on in the story that is being referred to in Hebrews. I always marvel, when I kind of go back a few layers in the stories of the Bible. What was their holdup? Why was the nation of Israel unable to hear this great message, this accurate message from God, from these trustworthy messengers? They should have been the ones who were most likely to, leap when God says jump. Like just think of their story, all right? Has everybody read their story in Exodus? Some slaves cry out to God. God sends an ambassador, a deliverer named Moses, okay? It's a long story, but Moses goes in there. The first thing he does is he takes his stick, he throws it in front of the Pharaoh of Egypt. It turns into a snake. We're off and running. Is everybody with me? All right? So that's the first sign. Then there's 10 plagues. Not 1, not 3, 10. 10 different plagues that are beset upon the nation of Egypt to prove that their God or their gods were false and that the one true God, the God of Israel, is the one true God. Okay? So the Israelites saw all of that. The Pharaoh finally lets them go on the last plague, which is, the Passover, if you know anything about that, but we don't have time. So the Pharaoh lets them go, and they head out, and they're almost to the Red Sea when the Pharaoh says, bummer, we just lost our entire workforce. Go get them. And he sends his army after the nation of Israel. And they get to the Red Sea, and Moses is there, and all the children of Israel are hearing the hooves and the wheels of the chariots of the army of Egypt, and they're like, Moses, way to go, bud. You got us out of town so that we could be killed here in the woods and taken back as slaves. And remember what Moses does? He takes the snake stick and he puts it in the water, and the water splits. And all of Israel, it tells us in Exodus, walks across on dry land. The armies of Egypt try to follow, and the water collapses on them. And they built a monument at the end of that. They built, put up some rocks at the site of where this happened. Does anybody think they needed the rocks to remember this? Like if you walked across the Red Sea that day, you're going to, hey, what are these rocks all about? Oh, yeah, I totally forgot. We walked across the Red Sea. That's crazy. No, they will never forget it, except, look at me, except that they did. Because these people who had seen more and heard more from God than probably any people in history came to the Jordan River and the prospect of crossing over in their lands that had been promised them. They had 2 messengers give them a good message, and they wanted to throw rocks at them until they were dead. Because that's what the heart will do. It's desperately wicked, easily duped. That's why trust is required to enter God's rest. Trust is required to enter God's rest. Look what it says in verse 3. For we who have believed enter that rest. That's where I got that. The writer of Hebrews, a Christian himself, says, hey, in the now, not just back then in the promised land, we in the now who believe, who trust in God, we are the ones who receive his rest. We're the ones who crawl up in his lap and feel his comfort in the storm-filled world that we live in. It's true of our eternal salvation. It's how we enter into relationship with God. We trust in who he's given us. That's Jesus. It's true in every present situation. No matter what's scrolling across your news feeds, God's over it, in control of it, and we can trust him in it. We who have believed can enter that rest. We enter that rest because trust produces rest. Conversely, those who fail to trust miss out on his rest. Look what it says in the second part of verse 3. For we who have believed enter that rest, as he has said. And now he's quoting what we read last week in Josh's time, Psalm 95, which references, this is getting really confusing, but it references the historical account of Kadesh Barnea. Hundreds of years later, in the story of Israel, King David writes a song about what happened in Exodus and in Numbers, and he says, hey, don't be like them. Because as God swore in his wrath back then, those who do not trust shall not enter my rest. When we trust in God, we enter his rest. When we don't, we don't. How's that for a simple sermon? Let's go home. Now what comes next, admittedly, kind of tough for me to understand and certainly for me to preach. Sometimes the Bible writes things that the crowd back then would be like, oh yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. Because it was the first century and they were Jewish and they had all these, experiences and teachings. We here in, Florida in 2025 will be like, huh? And so that's kind of what happens here. But just follow along with me. Everybody going to stay with me for the next 5 minutes? Everybody with me? Who's with me? Is anybody resting right now? Anybody sleeping? All right. This is where it's going to go. Here we go. Verse 3 one more time. For we who have believed enter that rest, as he has said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Now he shifts gears. Anybody got that friend who in the middle of a conversation, squirrel, anybody got that friend? And off they go talking about something else. They were just talking about this, and now we're talking about this. It's kind of what happens with the writer of Hebrews. He says, although, he's going to shift to creation. Everybody ready? Although his works, God's works, were finished from the foundation of the world. From his making of the world. For he has somewhere spoken, God has somewhere spoken in his word to us of the seventh day of creation in this way. And God rested on the seventh day from all his works. Who's familiar with the creation account? Anybody? Okay, so on the seventh day, God creates everything that exists in the first 6 days. Lots of conversation about that. I believe God could create everything in 6 seconds. Is everybody with me on this? I'm not going to argue times with you. But however he did it. First 6 days, everything's created. On the seventh day, he rests. Everybody with me? That's what the writer infers here, talks about. The somewhere that it was spoken of is in Genesis chapter 2. Lots of debate about this, as to what this means and as how it pertains to the rest of God as it's being spoken of here in Hebrews chapter 4. But I'll just give you this as kind of a summary. Again, God works for 6 days to create that all it is, and on the seventh day he rests. When he does this, God creates, for the first time anywhere, the concept of rest. It's the first rest, right? It's a principle that he passes on to people. He says in the Ten Commandments, as he issues those to Moses and the children of Israel, and the fourth one he says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. That's the seventh day, the Sabbath day. Remember the Sabbath, remember to rest, remember to reflect on God. More there, don't have time. But this is a key to experiencing human flourishing. You got to take breaks. If you're a workaholic, you're going to be dead sooner than you should be, okay? That was stark. Anyway, but you got to slow down. You got to slow down. It's just how we're designed. It's how God made us. It's in the wiring. You got to stop. You got to breathe, you got to rest, and certainly we need time to reflect on who God is in a special way. But there's more. There's more to this whole rest thing. I've read this before, heard this before as I went to school, but it was great to hear it in this context. There's a distinction between the seventh day and the first 6. Every one of the first 6 days has a time stamp. A time stamp simply says this, and it was morning and it was evening the first day. It was morning and it was evening the second day. All 6 days start and end that way, morning and evening. If you read Genesis chapter 2, where it talks about the seventh day, it just says that God rested. And it doesn't say morning or evening. And lots of scholars believe that that's on purpose, because the rest of God doesn't have a time stamp. It's eternal. It's established at creation, and it is ours for every generation. It's not rooted in that one instance of creation. It's into this rest that God places the first humans. It's perfect. Everything's great. Eden's awesome. But it's in this rest that sin enters and ruins our relationship with God. And so what's the penalty for man? They've got to toil and work and get tired in life because the rest has been ruined. Are you with me? Yeah. In love, God, through his son Jesus, has offered again his rest to anyone at any time, including today, if we would only put our trust in him and who he provides. Skip down to verse 6. Since therefore it remains for some to enter God's rest, and those who formerly received the good news failed to enter because of disobedience. Again, going back to the story of Israel, they were there, they heard Joshua and Caleb talk, and they said, no thanks, right? Heisman to God and to his messengers, all right? And their disobedience, if you know the story, excluded them from ever experiencing the promise. God actually comes at the end of Numbers 14 and he says, for all of the days that you spent scouting out the land that I intended to give you, 40 days, you're going to spend a year in the wilderness. That's how the 40 years got to be 40 years. And then at the end of that, you're all going to die, and nobody from this generation is going into the land that I promised you because of your disobedience and your disbelief. So disobedience leads to the exclusion from God's rest. So, verse 7. With all that in mind, with all of that story from the annals of history in the nation of Israel, he says, again, God appoints a certain day called Today, saying through David so long after. Okay, so Kadesh Barnea, now we've moved forward to Psalm 95 with David, who says this, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. David, referring to the mess that was Kadesh Barnea and the failure of Israel to trust and obey, says to his people in his time, hey, don't be like them. Today, if you hear God's voice, do not harden your hearts. And the writer of Hebrews, hundreds of years after David, says, just like David said, today, if you hear God's voice, do not harden your hearts. It's a beautiful appropriation of God's word in different times for this central idea of trust leading to rest. God's rest, instituted at creation, exists without end, and it's available to anyone and everyone on any day on two conditions: hearing his voice and not hardening your hearts. Hearing his voice, hearing his words, and not hardening your hearts towards them. Choosing to act, to trust and obey as God leads. That will lead you into his rest. My sister Kirsten is about a year older than me. When we were young, our parents would leave us all at the house, 12, 13, 10 years old. My other sister Erin's a couple years younger. And but then they'd call back with instructions, right? Anybody remember those days when you and your siblings would stay at the house? So, my sister would go to the phone. It was hung on the wall for all of you youngers. It had a long cord coming out of it. But she would, lift up the phone. And as the oldest, she was responsible for the other, two of us. And so she would talk to Mom. Yes, Mom. Yes, okay. Yes, I will. I'm sure. Yeah, I'll make sure they know. Okay, I love you. Bye. And then hang up the phone. And then she'd come to the other two of us, and she'd say, all right, Mom's going to be home in about an hour. She wants us to clean up our rooms. Our rooms need to be spotless. If our rooms are clean, she'll take us to Dairy Queen. All right, I'm listening. All right. She also said that if our rooms aren't clean, we're grounded for the weekend or for the week or some, so, reward, punishment, you decide. Okay? Who has a sibling that would maybe make that up every once in a while just so that, like, their room was already clean, right? And so, get off the phone and be like, I'm going to play, a little funny here on my other siblings. You guys got to clean your room. And then, and this would flash through my head. Is she lying? She could be lying. I didn't hear the phone ring. Maybe the whole thing was made up, right? Or even more sinister, I don't care. I mean, Mom, listen, I'm not cleaning up my room. Is she really going to ground me? Probably not. I'm awesome, right? I'm her favorite son, only son, but I'm her favorite son, right? And would she really take my sisters to Dairy Queen and not me? Now, if you knew my mom, all of the answers to those things were yes. She would ground me and she would, skip out on Dairy Queen. But for a moment, I'd have those questions in my head. Not unlike Eve when she's talking to the snake in the garden, right? And she's reconsidering what she's heard from the voice of God about the tree that she's not supposed to eat from, and she starts reasoning, maybe not this, not. And instead of trusting in him, she trusts in herself. You'll be glad to know I made it to Dairy Queen that night, cleaned my room, aces. Thank you, it's very nice. But if you're not picking up again what I'm putting down, experiencing God's rest is a result of trusting him in life. That's why later on when Solomon's talking to his kids, he says, hey guys, if I can give you one thing, it's this: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understandings. In all of your ways acknowledge him. And then he'll direct your paths. He didn't say this, but he could have said this. He'll direct you into rest. He'll give you rest. God the Father and God the Son speak liberally throughout the scriptures. God the Father in both Old and New Testaments. God the Son primarily in the New Testament. In fact, if you have a paper Bible and you read the Gospels, all of Jesus' words, usually in Bibles, paper Bibles, are in red letters. So there's just tons of stuff that Jesus said. I preach them to you all the time. Listen to me. When I preach those words, those are the words of God himself. And it's like he's, called you on the phone and I'm the messenger. I'm Kirsten. I'm the older sister. And I'm coming to you, all of my siblings, and I'm saying, okay, here's what the boss said. Here's the truth. And these are the things that you need to choose to trust and obey. I'm just going to give you one of the things that Jesus said in his time here on earth. Some of my favorite words that he ever uttered. He's standing in front of his friends in Matthew 11. And he starts like this. It's really theological to begin with. It's super clarifying. He says, all things have been handed over to me by my Father. Okay, so this is a Jewish carpenter who's collected a bunch of followers, and he's claimed to be the Messiah, the Son of God. And he says to these listeners, everything that's been handed over to me has been given to me by the Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father. The Father and I are unique. I know I'm one of you. I sleep and eat and go to the bathroom like the rest of you, but I'm different. I'm the Son of God. He says that. The Father knows me and I know him. And no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. So if you're numbered amongst those who, by God's grace, the Son has, chosen for you to be revealed to God, if you've made a connection with God through faith in Jesus Christ, that's how you know Jesus led you to himself. Are you with me? Maybe not. But let me get you to the part that I wanted to get to. Verse 28 says this. He looks out over this tired, beat up crowd of followers, and he says this, come to me. He says, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you what? Rest. He says, take my yoke upon you. It's a reference not to like an egg yolk. That's Y-O-L-K. The Y-O-K-E is that kind of wooden, neck handcuffs that goes between cows and the oxen who would plow fields. And it was used in the first century of Jewish rabbis in their teachings. You'd basically link up with a teacher of the Jewish faith and what he said about God, and you would join him in the yoke of his teaching. And Jesus says, all right, I know I'm your rabbi, but take my yoke upon you. Why? Because I want you to learn from me. And I'm gentle and I'm lowly in heart. And you're going to find, one more time, rest. Rest for your souls. He says, my yoke is easy. My burden is light. Come and join me in it. Trust me. And I'll give you rest. And so I say to you this morning, if you're here because you're trying to make someone else in your family happy, but you have no clue of what it is to truly follow, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in life, he's saying to you, come, you who are weary, heavy laden, I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and I'll lead you to what life is all about. If you've made that choice, I'm so happy for you. But if you're sitting here this morning and it's more than just a car breaking down on the side of the road, you're wrecked. Here's what I'm here to say. God loves you. He sees what you're in. He's there. And all he's asking for you to do is to trust him. Crawl up on his lap. Put your head on his shoulder. Rest as the noise goes on around you. He'll give you rest if you trust in him. Will you stand with us as we sing?